certain anthropologists, when it came to Zimbabwe, thought was going on was that Zimbabwe must have been built by some lesser Europeans, maybe the cursed descendants of Ham, who came into the African continent and then built Zimbabwe, and that would justify settler colonialism in Zimbabwe. That would justify Europeans being there.
Probably also maybe the ancient city of Benin, the ancient war of Benin. So there is this strange people that are just walking around in Africa doing something for the African people.
When you mentioned Benin, think of oh man, what was his name? There was a person who came to Benin. His name will come to me at some point, but he comes to Benin, he sees the city, and he says, wow, this must be the ancient city of Atlantis. And he takes this story and he brings it back, and this is the early 20th century. He takes the story, he brings it back to the West, and it's printed all over newspapers that Atlantis is really in this city inhabited by these ignorant people, and they don't know what they're doing inhabiting the city. Now, the folly of Europe and the Western world is that even if they believe that, then Britain goes in and burns the whole city to the ground. So it's it's just ridiculous what the West has conceived when it comes to African people.
How simple is it even for historians to dig up African history? Because now I think what is happening is that we have a competitor who have helped us to destroy everything we have had so that their narration can be the only one that exists. For our mistake, for our error, sometimes we tell them, but add us to your narration so that we can be there too. But it's not going to happen. They cannot add us to their narration. First of all, they're not even the one to narrate our story. Mm-hmm. So it means the work now becomes even harder for us. Because some of those documents that have been destroyed to justify their exploitation of us, mm-hmm. we're going to have to find them. How easy it is. Because if we don't, we run the risk of our children believing that really we have no history. I tell you, I have seen here in Italy again, this one is an African student, a young child that was born here, telling me that Africa really do not have history. If there is history, what is the proof? Mm-hmm. That is what this guy told me. I feel like I want to cry. Mm-hmm. I'm not a historian, but just thinking, ordinary common sense, you could understand. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think something you said very early in this interview is something that's very important. We put too much of a focus, too much energy, too much resource into trying to get others to understand who we are, and not enough in bringing about a renaissance amongst ourselves. You can't really, you can teach people and teach them until you're blue, right? About African history and all these things. But it would never make people truly respect you because you don't have power. This is what it comes down to. It comes down to a matter of power. Now, part of power is history, is the control over your own history and historical circumstances. But that control starts with you. That control starts with your group. It starts with your culture. It starts with your people. And once you have a great enough consensus amongst your people of who they are, what's their cultural background, what is the variations in their cultural background, and how those variations and those differences overlap and make for a stronger, more united Pan-African people, things like that. Once you have that, what my mentors, Dr. Malefikete Asante and Alma Mazama would say, Dr. Alma Mazama would say, once you have that, once you have consciousness amongst people, then you can move on to states of unity in various areas: economics, social unity, political unity, those kinds of things. Build an autonomous, not something that's dependent upon various organizations and various people and their empathy and their pity. And autonomy is something that you build yourself and you're able to hold on to on your own, not from the protection of others. Once you build that, you're respected, okay? Because you're on an equal playing field, and you then have the power to define, as Kwame Ture would say, to define and then make others accept your definition of who you are.
That is a very important thing to pay attention to. All right, now, looking at proof, like I was saying before, say maybe, for example, your student who have always have the mainstream media as a source of information now come to the conclusion that really Africa have no history. And this student happen to be in your class and is asking you a proof of the historicity of Africa. Okay, I know this is a very generic thing. I'm putting the whole of Africa in context here. So in this case, Ivo, what would you say?
To prove the history of Africa?
Yeah.
And you're saying this is someone of African descent asking me this?
Yeah.
One of the first things I would say is go ask your mother. Go ask your father. Go ask your grandmother. Start with your history. What is your family history? Because that is the history of Africa. What you are, the sum total of how you got here, where you are in this world, those little things make up what history is and what African history is and what a people's history is. So you need to start to, a lot of children in this day and age, they don't talk to their grandparents. Many of them don't know them, right? Or some of them, their grandparents are so young that they don't really have, elders' perspective to give to them. But I encourage children, particularly of African descent, to go back as far as you can in your generational tree to whoever's the oldest person living and talk with them about your own particular family history, because the rest of history, the rest of African history, as Afro-American history, history of the Caribbean or on the continent, none of that is really going to make sense to you unless you have a personal connection to it. Okay. So if you tell me that you don't have a history, then I say, you're a lie, because, your history's today, just today, as you woke up, you brushed your teeth and you came to school and, those kind of things. But ask your parents what they went through, what they experienced in life. And then you would start to get a sense of, well, people must have history and we must have done things because we're doing them now. We're making history, we're creating history today, right now. So it would start to click in people that that's a nonsensical idea to have, that there was no history in Africa, because the Western world refuses to either acknowledge it, and you're trapped in this Western educational paradigm. But it generally helps people once they start with themselves and they start with their own family to kind of click, for it to click in them that, okay, that's a ridiculous notion that my ancestors had no history.
What should we use as material to validate the conversation? Say maybe books and things like that in terms of our history.
So one very good history book on the history of Africa is called The History of Africa: The Quest for Harmony. And that was written by Malefikete Asante. Dr. Malefikete Asante is currently in his third edition. I actually assisted on the third edition of this text. So I know that, personally, that it's a very good text for people to use, particularly those of African descent who want to really understand their own history. Dr. Asante, by the way, is he's called the father of Afrocentricity. He developed the term Afrocentricity and the ideological paradigm behind it. So he uses this, of course, throughout the text. Toyin Falola has some very good books that I enjoy, that I feel, particularly from Nigerian perspectives, that he tries to put in. I mean, and when I say very good books, I mean he's probably the most published African scholar in the world right now. But he has some things that I feel is helpful. There's only one, maybe two Africanists, which Africanists are largely people who come out of the field of history and maybe anthropology, some who, but largely white people from either Britain or whatever, that have tried to make some good in terms of presenting history that is truer to African perspective, although they have many errors. But a few that I can think of is the works of Basil Davison, Graham Connor, and Kevin Shillington.